Hello everyone, Lucky Knight here, and today I will be creating a tutorial video on how to build a WASD controlled tank. So here is my concept of the idea. So A and D, left and right, turn the vehicle. Pressing W increases the throttle to multiple stages. And then of course D reduces the throttle to a stopping point, and then if you continue to a reversing point. Okay, so the basic idea here is to create a drive system that operates different bearings at different speeds. So let's create a basic chassis. So we're going to need a couple of things to make this possible. We're going to need a steering controller. To do that, we'll place a bearing that turns with the controller, the driver's seat, and then we'll use some pipe and some sensors to engage our steering motors. Perfect. Now we need to build a throttle. So the throttle needs to be, we're just going to have a basic stop mode, a reverse mode, first gear, second gear. We'll keep that super simple. Just for the sake of the tutorial, you'll be able to use that concept in making all of those drives work by just repeating the process I show you. There we go. So, we're going to need an engine that is going to operate our throttle. Maybe we'll put this one right up front there. Okay, and to make sure that we have it orientated correctly, we'll hop in it. We'll connect the seat to it. So forward moves it that way, perfect, and reverse moves it that way, perfect. Also, you can test the function of our left and right sensors. Perfect. Okay, so let's put it back on the lift, and let's start building our drive system. So I'm just going to make this two-wheel drive. I'm just going to use the smaller suspension. We'll try to keep it as small and compact as we can. And basically we need to put one right next to each other, and one right next to each other. And from here, what I like to use for the drive system are the medium-sized pipes. Okay, so create an angle piece so that we can direct our power towards the outside. Okay, and then we'll set up our bearings. So here's the idea. This set of bearings will operate our first gear. Then put a small section of pipe on. Now this set of bearings will operate our second gear. Put a small section of pipe on. Okay, now this set of bearings will operate our reverse gear. And finally, this set of bearings will operate our turning gear. And actually, we don't need to use a set of pipe on that. We can just attach the wheel at that point. Okay, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4 bearings per drive. Now, what that translates to, how many motors I'm going to need. I'm going to need at least 4. However, each one needs to do different things. So, we might need to build a housing for all of our engines, and actually we can probably place these all underneath the vehicle. So, we'll probably put one here. That'll be our forward 1 gear. There's our forward 2nd gear, and we'll put one towards the back. That's going to be our reverse gear, and then we'll have another one towards the back to even the weight as our turning gear. And then we'll need to have one more turning gear, because one needs to turn the wheels on one side, the other needs to turn the wheels on the other side. So we'll turn these up to 4 just so that there is some suspension on it, and it's not completely weighed down. Okay, so let's color code this a little bit so it makes it a little bit easier to follow. So we want gear 1 to be green. So this engine will be green, and gear 1's green. Now, we want this to all operate off of a switch that we can turn on and off easily. So we can put that switch near the driver's seat. So with this, we're going to need some of these logic gates. And with these logic gates, we will be able to make it so that the sensor needs to be active and the switch needs to be active in order for this to engage. So we need first gear, second gear, and then we also need a reverse gear. So we have first gear, second gear, and a reverse gear. So let's set this to reverse. Second gear, there we go. And then we'll turn our turning gears blue. So that'll be this one here. And this one here. Reverse gear we're going to make yellow. And then second gear will just be a lighter shade of green. Okay, so I want first gear to drive this motor. So this motor is going to drive this bearing, this bearing, this bearing, as well as this bearing. Now if I were to try to drive it in its current state now, we'll turn the switch on to it, and then we'll connect this to this, and then sensor 1 is also the input to our logic gate, and we will turn this to AND, so we need both inputs in order for it to drive. I turn that on, I shift into first gear, and nothing happens. Well, what's going on? Well, let's make sure that our engine is going to be operating. Switch it on, first gear, the engine comes on, but there's still no motion. So what's happening is that those other bearings are free to spin as they want. You can see our first gear bearings are moving, but then the other 2 drives are spinning freely, so we're not translating any of that motion to the wheels. So what we need to do to remedy this is to connect all of our other drive bearings. Once the other drive bearings are in, the electric motors will actually lock them in place, so we'll be able to transfer energy to our outside wheel. So let's go ahead and connect our second gear. That also needs to be powered by the switch. As well as our second drive sensor. And it is powering the second motor, so we want the second motor to power this, 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 and this. And make sure that all of our bearings are oriented in the forwards direction. There we go. So now let's implement our reverse motor. So this is going to be powering our reverse motor, and our reverse sensor will also be needed to be activated, as well as the power switch. So now that we have that engaged, we can run power from our reverse engine to these bearings. Okay, so we want to make sure that the reverse bearings are actually spinning the wheels in reverse. So let's make sure we orientate these bearings into the backwards motion. So now we have one bearing on each drive axle that's still available. So for this, we need to have we have two separate motors to run, two bearings on one side, two bearings on the other side. So what we need to do is have our turning sensors, activate those. So just to keep things simple, I'm going to have the sensor on the left drive the left motor, which will drive the left bearings. And you can have these either go forwards or backwards. It'll work each way. You just have to make sure you have your switch turned the right way to make it work. Basically, it'll be like you'll be braking on one side or increasing the track speed on one side. So now we want to set our left turn motor to these bearings here, and make sure that we orientate them the same way that we have our other side. So if you have the left side as reverse bearings, make sure that the right side is reverse bearings. If you have the left side as front bearings, have the left side as front bearings. Okay, so now when we get into our vehicle and we press, for example, the A key, it switches on that motor. So we do need to turn the speed on. Make sure that we have this going. Now we want second gear to be a little bit faster than first gear, and we want our turning motors to be slightly faster than our reverse gear. So now when we get in, we can press A or D. It causes us to turn. So now this is actually backwards from what I was hoping. So all I need to do is switch this turning bearing there, which reverses that. So now that actually didn't work either. Oh, okay, it was right the first time. So when I press left, the outer wheels will spin faster than the inner wheels. Okay, and I also want our throttle to function a little faster, so I'm going to turn that up one more notch. There we go. And as you can see, I have no drive yet. Let's turn on this. Now we have first gear engaged. Okay, so we have a problem. Our first gear is not attached to that. And our second gear needs to be attached to that. There we go. Now, we go into reverse, we back up. You can see our switch is activated there. And we can turn. Now let's go forward. So you press W, that spins that first motor forward. That engages this, but why is that not coming on? I think what we have is our parking sensor. It engage instead of. So let's make sure this is put to that. And this is on. Interesting. There we go. So I had the wrong sensor hooked up to it. Now that should work. There we go. There's first gear, second gear, park, and reverse. So even when you're driving forward now, we can still turn because we increased the speed of the outside wheels. Now this seems to be turning pretty slowly, so what we can do is increase the speed of our turning motors. And there you go. That is how you set up a basic WASD controlled tank. There are a lot of other things you can do to improve this. There are ways to activate multiple sensors at once, so you can use your drive system to engage multiple engines at the same time, which can increase your speed, because you'll have one bearing turning another bearing that's turning the wheel, as opposed to this, like it's just currently locked, and the outer bearings are currently locked. So that causes the electric motors will lock the bearings in place, so the one engine that's driving them drives all of those bearings. But if you activate, for example, if I were to switch this off, if I were to put another brig right here, that will activate two sensors at the same time, which makes it go even faster. So now we have a bearing spinning another bearing. Now the downfall here is I don't have enough room, the way I have this set up, to have a parking gear. But what I could do is rearrange where my sensors are placed. And you can see there it's currently engaging both first and second gear. And I can back the throttle up, there's only first gear, or I can Alright, well there you go guys, that is my basic tutorial on how to create a WASD driven tank. Thanks again for watching, and if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. I hope you liked the video, and please subscribe to my channel.